A while ago, and by a while ago, I mean 4 days ago, we saw this. Trump administration finalizes rule to end federal support for gender-affirming care. You know, it's just to protect the children, right? It's just about Medicaid no longer being used for gender-affirming care for minors. Obviously, trans healthcare is beneficial for trans kids. A lot of the issues that trans people, trans adults will tell you about when it comes to how they are struggling with gender dysphoria and so on manifested because of going through a puberty that doesn't align with their gender identity. It's incredibly frustrating to tell to cis people who do not have this mismatch how we are feeling and how we know that it's benefiting us, right? When I was a kid, I was trans. I didn't transition, but I was still trans. I had this mismatch and I knew that I would have been happier if I was female. If I was AFAB, I wouldn't have to deal with these issues that I'm struggling with now. And as a kid, I was incredibly confused about it. But I still knew that if I go on HRT, if I get help, if I get like bottom surgery and so on, that I will feel better. New study challenges claim that trans teens later regret gender-affirming care. This is from Pink News. This was also August 5th. A couple of days ago. The study uses data gathered from 445 young people diagnosed with gender dysphoria under the care of 4 clinics in Canada between 2012 and 2017. Of the sample group, 331 participants were assigned female at birth and 114 were assigned male at birth. 353 underwent gender-affirming hormone therapy. 4 of them later stopped hormones. 4 of the 445 young people. 4 of them later stopped hormones. And just 1 ceased hormone treatment and returned to identifying as their sex assigned at birth. This also doesn't say anything about regret, because even if you go on HRT and you find out, hey, it's not for me actually, you can just stop and you know more about yourself now. 13 participants later returned to identifying as their sex assigned at birth after an average of roughly 2.5 years, while some of the participants shifted between a binary and non-binary gender identity after about 2.5 years. Obviously, transphobes are going to look at this and they're going to claim if you wait long enough, they will stop. It doesn't actually say about like any like reasoning behind it. Is it regret? Is it the environmental pressure? Is it just too hard? Right? It doesn't even say anything about that. Gender fluidity. In the study, adolescents were found to have a more fluid gender identity if they initially identified as non-binary. However, none of these non-binary identifying adolescents reverted to a binary identity that aligned with their sex assigned at birth. Almost 80% of these non-binary participants began hormone therapy with a discontinuation rate of 1.1%. None of the young people who stopped puberty blockers or secondary supportive medical treatments due to a change in their gender identity ended up identifying with their sex assigned at birth. From this study, it can be concluded that an overwhelming majority of young people who were a part of a university-associated clinics in Canada to receive gender-affirming care still identify as transgender or non-binary, with over 97% still identifying as such. It doesn't say anything about regret, but just that there is a chance that somebody might revert is for a lot of people enough to actually just take this care away completely and say that we are just experimenting or so on. For everybody else, obviously it is beneficial if you go on HRT, but obviously it doesn't fix a shitty environment. If your environment is still continuously invalidating you, dismissing you, you get discriminated against in the workplace, in schools and so on, this is going to take a toll on your mental health and it's going to make certain things worse. Anyways, despite Trump taking away this healthcare, this crucial healthcare that works, Massachusetts has vowed to assume the full cost of gender-affirming healthcare for transgender children and teenagers covered by the state's Medicaid and CHIP programs if a new Trump administration rule takes effect this October. The Trump administration's Medicaid administrator, Dr. Mehmet Oz, described the treatments as harmful and sex-rejecting procedures in a statement, while major medical organizations continue to support gender-affirming care as appropriate treatment for some transgender young people. The things that the Trump administration and so on is saying about gender affirming care for trans kids, for trans people in general. It is a politically driven ideology. They are all politically captured, ideologically captured people who want to push these ultra conservative things. This does not align with reality. It doesn't align with the science. And if you have gender dysphoria, resolving this mismatch actually works. Whereas being pressured by your surrounding, by your environment to fulfill a role based on your reproductive organs and so on doesn't work, right? Conversion therapy doesn't work. We know this. The federal government currently covers around 50% of Medicaid costs for children and 65% of CHIP costs. Massachusetts says it will use its Affirming Healthcare Trust Fund to make up the difference if federal funding is cut off. I am glad that there are still some politicians who use their position of power in order to back up trans people. I wanted to share that because what the Trump administration is doing, it's cruel, it's evil, it doesn't align with reality, it doesn't align with the science, it doesn't align with the lived experience of trans kids, trans adults, and so on. And I figured that it would be good to at least end on like somewhat of a high note with this one, right? Because, hey, it might feel like the world is against trans people right now because a lot of people in positions of power, a lot of people, in the content creator sphere, they make a living by being cruel to trans people. But the science and reality is still backing us up. And some people who are not ideologically captured are going to see through this. Just hate that we are being used as a means of re-election rather than doing it for the sake of it being correct. I mean, we are also like being used as a scapegoat on the other end, right? Like the Trump administration, the Republicans and so on, what they are doing is just being cruel to trans people in order to get re-elected. It doesn't matter which side is doing it, we're being used anyways. And I think I'd rather be used in a positive way than constantly be the scapegoat of all evil. There shouldn't even be like an issue that the Trump administration is like fixating on, because gender affirming care works, it helps. But hey, sometimes I like to appreciate some wins, I guess, because we are currently living in a world where a lot of people are making a lot of money by harassing us, abusing us, going after us.